This will be the lecture for proper bed preparation, especially as it relates to perennial and annual gardens. We will do a separate video later on for tree planting and care. Why is proper bed preparation important? Well, roughly 80% of the issues with our gardens and landscapes come from a lack of proper planting and soil preparation. Proper bed prep leads to all of these things: less fertilizer usage, fewer pests and diseases, healthier plants with less transplant shock. Perennials can even double or triple their size in the first year. Here's a garden from my neighbor. You can see this is at planting time. Notice the retaining wall. So we can put any soil mix that we wanted in there. And 3 months later, look at the growth. These perennials are huge now. So if it's good for the plants, why isn't it done? Well, it's a lot of work. It's not nearly as fun as buying plants, and it's expensive relative to the plants. So if your plants cost you about $5, the hole that it goes in should cost you about $25. That's just a hard number for a lot of people to deal with. Here are the 5 basic steps: soil testing, killing the weeds, dealing with drainage, amending the soil, and proper fertilization. All right, I'm not saying you have to run out and do expensive chemical testing, though you can if you want to, but you should have some basic knowledge. We'd like the pH to be around 5.5 to 6.5 ideally. We'd like soil organic matter to be around 30%. That might not seem like a lot, but typical Ohio soils have 1 to 3% and are high in clay content, meaning they're very dense. We'd like potassium to be around 120 pounds of available potassium per acre, and phosphate to be around 50 available pounds per acre. And here's the thing. You need an official soil test to know these things, but most Ohio soils already have enough potassium and phosphate, so unless your plants are showing deficiency signs, there isn't really much point in doing an official test. It's more important to focus on pH. Yes, 5.5 to 6.5 is ideal for most perennials, but they're actually quite forgiving most of the time. But you would like your pH to be lower, acidic, rather than higher, alkaline, if at all possible. Why? Better nutrient availability. You can find charts like this all over the internet and in every soil textbook that there is. Look at the nutrients and you will see that most of them are available at a lower pH. For Ohio soils, it is very, very difficult to make changes, and it can take years to make permanent ones. It's easier to raise the pH with lime than it is to lower with sulfur compounds. Unfortunately, we usually want to lower the pH in our landscapes and gardens in Ohio. Again, most perennials and annuals are really quite forgiving and do reasonably well around a neutral pH. There are some exceptions. I'm not asking you to memorize those exceptions, but you might look to pH issues and nutrient problems if your plants are having problems. Step 2, kill the weeds. 1 year seeds equals 7 years of weeds. Get rid of them before you plant, if at all possible. You can hand pull. That might be necessary if you have an established landscape. You can use chemicals, either pre or post-emergent. You can use some type of barrier, like newspaper, to kill things before planting. Please don't use landscape fabric or weed mats. They don't prevent weeds from germinating. They make them a lot harder to pull and can prevent efficient water movement in the soil. But this is the biggest one. Create a well-drained soil. More plants are killed from poor drainage than any other reason. You can do a soil test, but in general, sandy soils drain quickly and clay soils drain poorly. Most homeowners, property managers, clients, etc., they can tell you how their property drains. Standing water, soggy soils, taking more than half a day to drain after rain are all signs of poor drainage. Now, if the homeowner doesn't have a clue, you can actually have them do a simple test. Dig a hole, 12 by 12 by 12. Fill it with water, let it drain. Now you've simulated a rain. Fill it again and time how long it takes. If it takes less than an hour, your soil drains too fast and is poorly drained. If it takes more than 3 hours, it drains too slowly and your soil is poorly drained again. So what are things that we can do to improve the drainage? You can do drain tiles. They're expensive. They're a little harder to install. Raised beds. They're not always practical for every situation. The best way is simply by adding organic matter to the soil. So here's an example of an installation of drainage tiles, small, simple raised beds, or we can add organic amendments. What do soil amendments do? Look at this list here. Are any of these things bad? No, they're all good things. So adding organic amendments is actually a good thing for the soil. And you can use just about anything that's available. This is just a simple list, right? If you get peat moss, you can get leaf humus, you can have home compost. There's all kinds of different compost. If you live in a rural area, it's entirely possible a local farmer will allow you to pull off their manure pile. Your soil needs to end up looking somewhat like this, raised by the organic matter, and very easy to dig. Some folks will recommend inorganic amendments while they have their place. They're not usually the best to work with. Selection of inorganic amendments like gypsum or sand or crushed gravel, things like that, are going to greatly depend upon your soil texture. They have their place, but they're not usually recommended. Organic amendments are better. So, how much? 30% by volume is ideal. All right, that's roughly 4 inches of organic matter per 12 inches of soil depth. And if you divide 4 by 12, you get 0.33, close enough to 30%. Right? How deep can you go? Can you do double digging? That's an old British thing that takes you down 24 inches. In Ohio, that's not normally practical. Most people will go get a rototiller. Get the biggest rototiller you possibly can. Use a rototiller to get peat moss or other organic matter into your soil. You need to be able to roughly work the soil with your hands. So, how do you know how much is the right amount? Calculate your total square footage. You can break any even weirdo shapes up into circles and squares and triangles and then simply add those up. You just need a rough number. It doesn't have to be exact. You multiply that square footage by the depth that you need to add, which is 4 inches for every 12 inches of organic matter of soil depth, or 0.33. Then, if you are ordering cubic yards, you have to convert the cubic feet into cubic yards. If you are ordering cubic feet, that other number is the right amount of organic matter that you need to do. So here's an example. Your bed is 12 by 15. That's 180 square feet. Multiply that by 0.33, and you get 59.4 cubic feet of organic matter. If you needed to convert that to cubic yards, you divide that by 27, because 1 cubic yard is 27 cubic feet. On Carmen, there will be a practice quiz that you can take as many times as you'd like for simple calculations for organic material, and we are going to talk about fertilizer calculations in another video. As always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to get in touch.